Hey now, 580 Sports Talk going up on a Tuesday after a long weekend off. We are back and better than ever. I'm Brendan Dzwierzynski, solo in studio today. Dan Lucero still on vacation for a couple more days. Kyle Manthe is with us in the control room. Kyle will be stopping by for a long weekend edition of The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly coming up later this hour, plus for What Is Wrong With You later on in the show. We've got a short show for you today and a packed guest list. We are done at 5 o'clock. That's right. We are done a full hour early because we've got Royals baseball on the air, taking on the Detroit Tigers, game 2 of that series, as the Royals try to avoid putting together another losing streak. They've lost 2 in a row after the dramatic, thrilling win on Saturday, in which Samad Taylor, in his first career game, had a walk-off hit. Thrilling. I was at that game. It was KU Day. Maybe the good vibes will continue. No, they have not continued since then. The Royals have lost 2 straight. Daniel Lynch versus Michael Lorenzen tonight, 5:40 first pitch in Detroit. 5 o'clock pregame start time on the Royals radio network. So we are out of here at 5 o'clock. But we do have a bunch to get to on the show today. That includes some Royals talk from the weekend. And I'm not going to say potentially positive reinforcements in terms of wins and losses or long-term success, but there maybe is reason to believe that the worm is turning at least slightly. There's going to be a little more pitching depth coming. Not necessarily good depth, but depth. Maybe Bob Witt has started to figure it out. We'll talk about those things coming up. And again, another piece of commendation. I want to give a little credit to the Royals front office and the Royals coaching staff for a good process. It hasn't really worked out because they keep losing, but the process working out. So we're going to talk about that and how the Royals have handled their personnel coming up here in just a matter of moments. Also this hour, Matt Verderame is going to stop by as we talk all things NFL. Matt usually joins us on Mondays, but because we were off yesterday for Juneteenth, he will join us today. Plenty to get to from around the NFL world. 4 o'clock hour, we'll talk a lot of Big 12. Michael Swain will join us for our usual Tuesday interview, our Jayhawk Weekly on the Fleming Place Wine and Spirits hotline, including breaking news earlier today. Zach Clemens is back for KU. That's right. He announced back on March 22nd that he was leaving. He was transferring. He was going to dip out of the KU program. One of 8 Jayhawks who left. And then we found out today from Bill Self, he's actually back on campus. He's taking classes, and he's going to redshirt this year. How in the world did it happen that Zach Clemens, of all the players who transferred out, is the one who ends up coming back to KU and spurning UC Santa Barbara? We will talk about that coming up with Michael Swain in the 4 o'clock hour. I'm still kind of surprised by it, and really, it's just Whether he sticks around at KU after a redshirt or not, I don't really know. But I guess, a practice body who at least knows the system is better than a guy who's not going to play who doesn't know the system at all, maybe. Plus, Bob Huggins this weekend. It sucks. It sucks what has happened to the last couple of weeks of Bob Huggins' career, that this is how his legacy is going to be capped off, that a ridiculous rant, I guess, screed, if you will, on a Cincinnati radio station, and then a pretty horrific DUI report are how the storied and truly great career of a great basketball coach and a guy who had a huge impact on the state of West Virginia, Bob Huggins, came to a close. We'll talk about Huggy Bear a little bit coming up in the 4 o'clock hour, what it means for West Virginia, and on a larger scale, what it means for Big 12 basketball coming up in 2023, 2024. We'll get to all that. Plus, we've got your texts coming in on the text line, 785-272-9429, and your comments on YouTube. The name of our YouTube channel is Sports on 580 WIBW. Come swing by, find us on YouTube. You can watch the live stream, check out all of our old videos, and hop into the comment section as well. Appreciate everyone who is already listening along, whether it's on 580 AM, FM 104.9, online at 580WIBW.com, or on YouTube on our channel, Sports on 580 WIBW. But we start today, and we start this week, a shortened week since we're starting on Tuesday, and a shortened show since we're done at 5, with Kansas City Royals baseball. 1953, that is where we stand. I was cross-talking with Jake and Fulton on Mic'd Up earlier today, and the Royals, I did the math with them, need to play 489 baseball the rest of the way, darn near 500, They've got 90 games left, and they need to win 44 of them if they want to finish with under 100 wins under 100 losses this season. Oh, they're going to go under 100 wins. We know that for damn sure at this point. But they need to go 44 and 46 the rest of the way to avoid 100 losses. I'm going to be completely honest with you. I have a hard time seeing that happening. I told the guys 90% they're going to lose 100 games this year. It's unfortunate that that's where we are. I will say, Kyle, you and I played this game last week when we did either or over under. We both said they'll get to 20 wins before next Monday. They got one of them. They got one this weekend. So only need one more between now. You got 2 more against the Tigers, 4 against the Rays. You got a couple more chances before we get to that deadline, the next off day coming up on Monday. So we will hope for the best for that. But you had at least a little bit in the way of good vibes this weekend. You had Samad Taylor with the winning hit to beat the Angels in a wild game on Saturday. I was happy to get to go. First time at the K so far this year. Is a little late in the year. I usually try to get out a couple times a season. Who doesn't love a good day at the ballpark, even when the team is, well, genuinely terrible? And it was KU Day, and the band was there, and Lance Leipold spoke in the middle of the game on Crown Vision, and Jalen Daniels threw at the first pitch. That's why I went, because it was KU Day. Sweet jersey giveaway, by the way. Very cool. And the Royals go down big. They're down 8-2. And Mike Trout has his first multi-hit game in a couple weeks. And Shohei Ohtani hits another home run. He was awesome this weekend, by the way. I was stoked to finally see an Ohtani home run in person. And then the Royals come back. They just pounded the Angels bullpen. And it was hit after hit. Guys were walking. And I even said at one point, how do you keep walking Royals batters? How do you do this? None of these guys walk. None of these guys have a good eye at the plate. And then you get tied at 8, and then Angels go up by 1. Royals tie the game again. And then you get the heroics from Samad Taylor launching a ball deep to center field over the head of Mike Trout. Good vibes. He was feeling great. Pitching was not especially great for either side, frankly. There was a lot of reason for most of the game to think, wow, this Royals team looks just as bad as ever. But you got some good feelings. You got some positivity. Maybe Samad Taylor can be a guy. Or at the very least, maybe he can be someone who gives a little bit of a spark. Maybe he can be someone who adds just a little bit of a catalyst for, a minute amount of success for this team this year. The rest of this year, anyway. Well, he's had 1 hit since then. He's 2 for 10. And has walked twice. That's positive. We knew he was good at getting on base in that regard. Walked over 14% of the time in the minor leagues. And now, through 13 plate appearances, he's walking over 15% of the time in the majors. So, tiny sample size. But that's the positivity we got on Saturday. And then we got a loss on Sunday. And then on Monday, Jordan Lyles pitched. We are now 15 starts for the Royals into the Jordan Lyles era. And stop me if you have heard this before. But ladies and gentlemen, friends, Roman's countrymen, the Royals have still lost every single start of the Jordan Lyles experience. 15 starts. 15 losses for the Kansas City Royals. That is now a major league record. Congratulations, your team has made history. 15 straight losses in Jordan Lyles starts. And the thing that is mind-blowing and frankly frustrating, because I'm sure he is thinking about this, I'm sure it is on his mind. He pitched pretty well yesterday. He had a good game. He gave you not a complete game. He gave you a quality start. Excuse me, wrong terminology. He gave you a quality start. He only gave up 1 run through 6 innings. And that wasn't enough. Now, granted, not great to end your day giving up 2 base runners and not recording an out once you get into the 7th inning. But still, even after those runs scored, that is still a quality start for Jordan Lyles. There have been very few of those over the course of the first 72 games of the Kansas City Royals season. Very few of those. And they still ended up losing. And I don't even blame Matt Quattrero or the rest of this staff for deciding, let's let Jordan Lyles keep going. We all know exactly what his role is on this team. He is a veteran innings eater. He is supposed to give some mentorship, I guess. He is supposed to help along some of the young guys. And he is supposed to eat a ton of innings and give your bullpen a rest. So I have no problem giving him the start of the 7th inning when you're up and he's only given up 1 run through 6. It didn't end well, but I have a hard time getting upset at Jordan Lyles in this instance for losing that game. Now, still, they lost the game, and it is unthinkable to lose 15 straight. Even the Royals, with their winning percentage this year, which I want to make sure I know exactly, is it 240, 264? I had 2 numbers transposed. 264. So even in 15 games this year, the Royals would be expected to win 3.96 times, 4 times. Even how bad the Royals are this year, you would expect that they would have won 4 of those 15 starts for Jordan Lyles. None of them. Not a single one. That is unbelievable. For what it's worth, interestingly enough, if you want to have a little bit more fun with math and fun with small sample sizes, the Royals' winning percentage in games not started by Jordan Lyles, well, it's also not, especially great, but they'd only be 19 and 38. They would have won a third of their games at the very least, as opposed to just barely over a quarter of their games so far. So again, that's not even really damning with faint praise. That's just this team stinks, and one guy in particular has stunk more than the rest. But it is really hard to imagine getting to that point where you've lost 15 straight. There's not even really any analysis about it. They're just terrible, and he's been terrible, although, again, not his fault. Pitching-wise, though, as much as I spent time last week telling you that I think it's a lost cause, as much as I spent time saying I don't really know how you're going to fix it, maybe there is a reason to believe, maybe, that things are going to get a little bit better. Not markedly better, not this team is going to end up actually winning a ton of games, not, well, actually they will win 70 of their next 75 games, and they're going to find a way to avoid 100 losses. But they are going to get some pitching depth back. This was from David Lesky, friend of the program and of Mic'd Up, on Twitter yesterday. Ryan Yarbrough is on rehab assignment, which is awesome, by the way. Thank God for that. Angel Zerpa is pitching again. Brad Keller should be on a rehab assignment shortly. The Royals are getting some pitching depth back shortly. I didn't say it was good, but it is depth. And frankly, I am open to trying anything with any of these dudes at this point. Is Ryan Yarbrough great? Absolutely not. Although he was pitching really well when he took that line drive right off the face that broke all those bones, gave him those facial fractures. He actually was pitching pretty well in that game. It's at least something that's at least maybe a better option as a piggyback guy with an opener and tag teaming Carlos Hernandez and Ryan Yarbrough. Or just having a guy, if your starter gets chased in the 4th, you've got a guy who can give you the end of the 4th plus the 5th plus the 6th. A true long reliever. There aren't a whole lot of those in Major League Baseball right now. So at least that's something. At least that's a piece that can be used. I'm excited by the notion of Angel Zerpa. I think there have been some obvious young player growing pains with him. I think we have also seen at least a couple of small examples of small flashes why you think, maybe he is a guy. Maybe he is someone who can at least be, again, useful. I'm not saying he's going to be good. I'm not saying he's going to be great. I'm saying that he can at least be useful for this organization in some regard. If he can give you 5 innings every 5 days and is not going to completely blow the game, I don't need a quality start. Can you give up 3 runs in 5 innings and at least keep you theoretically in the game? That would be good enough for me. And then there's Keller, who just could not find the strike zone, but maybe because it's taken so long, he was legitimately injured. Maybe that was throwing him off, and that's why he couldn't throw strikes. I don't know. It's at least something. I don't think Jordan Lyles is getting DFA'd. They paid him way too much money and gave him too much time, too long of a contract. But to have some of these guys back, to be able to at least try something different, positive for me. Positive. Just get anything else in there. Try new things. And that's where I wanted to give credit to the personnel staff for the Royals, to JJ Piccolo, to everybody else who works in the front office. I'm sure Matt Quattrero has input on this as well. They DFA'd Mike Myers the other day. Those first 3 starts were a complete mirage. I remember being right here at this microphone not long ago. It was right before he started against the Marlins, or piggybacked against the Marlins earlier this month, about 2 weeks ago. In fact, I think it was exactly 2 weeks ago. when he stunk. He 3 innings, gave up 7 runs in those 3 innings. And he said, yeah, I pitched really well the last couple of times out. I wasn't expecting the approach the Marlins took, etc. He has been terrible ever since. Royals DFA'd him. They bring up Brooks Kriske, probably not the guy I would have brought up right away, but they're trying something new. They're bringing new guys up. They're trying to develop new habits. They're trying to develop new momentum, whatever they're trying to do by bringing up a myriad of different guys. Totally fine with me. Just try something new, anything new. That's what I've been begging for and pounding the table for weeks, for months, frankly, for a couple of years now to some degree or another. Now, I don't think they've gone far enough. I would try even more things. For example, Angel Zerpa. There's no reason to put him in AAA unless you just need him to get a couple of AAA starts to warm him back up and stretch him out for major league readiness. He should be on the big league club as soon as he can. I don't need him to go to AAA and spend extra weeks or months there. No, get him to the big club. Let's see what he's got. Let's see if with this new pitching coaching group, Angel Zerpa can be turned into, I'll use the word useful again, a useful piece for this rotation for the rest of the season, or a useful piece out of the bullpen. However you can get him to be functional. Maybe you just end up with 3 or 4 different guys who can all go 3 innings. And you just have a game that's Angel Zerpa, Ryan Yarbrough, Carlos Hernandez. And that's just the group you pitch every 5 days. And you just 3 dudes piggybacking on top of one another. And that's just what you do. I don't know. It would at least be something. It would at least be trying something. Give me Austin Cox up here. We saw him for not even a cup of coffee. 1 sip. 1 little tiny taste of a cup of coffee earlier in the season. We saw some positivity there. We saw some good things out of the bullpen, not starting, which I would have liked to see. Bring them on up. Let's try it out. Let's see something here. Get these guys up. I know that I am beating a dead horse. I know I have told you this for days on end at this point, that I want them to try something new. And I give them credit. Again, Myers isn't working out. We have nothing invested in him. Let's move on. Chopping block, move on. It took the last regime way too long, way too often, even with the guys who had no sort of sentimental attachment to the organization. It took way too long to move on from those guys. So I'm happy that is what the Royals are doing. I think they can go even farther with it, but I'm not going to complain too much when at least they're doing something. The cupboard is bare, okay? It really is. But you can try to manipulate. You can try to mix it up. You can do all sorts of different things to try to develop something out of that group. Is it going to work? Maybe not. But the process is good when you're already bad, when you don't have talent. The process is good if you are trying new things, if you're trying to get creative with that personnel. It's the same principle as what the service academies do in football, right? Army, Air Force, Navy, the schools that run the triple option or some variation of triple option football where, hey, we have restrictions on how big our offensive linemen can be. That's tough. That makes things very hard in Division I football. We've got restrictions on all these different things. So let's run something that is going to even the playing field. We don't need the best athletes. We need the best discipline in order to run this system. And yeah, some years we might only win 2 games. Some years we're going to win 4. Some will win 6. Sometimes you get a great year like Navy had several years back. You get the Keenan Reynolds years. Okay? That's what you have to do. You've got to try to make the best of what you have. That, I think, is what the Royals are trying to do. Their talent is worse relative to the rest of Major League Baseball than, say, Navy is generally to the rest of the American Athletic Conference. But I think my point still stands. You've got to find a way to use your pieces to the best of your ability. And I appreciate that the Royals are at least trying to do those things, even if it's not turning into more wins and losses. We've got a lot more to get to here on 580 Sports Talk. Again, we are done early today because of Royals baseball. We're off at 5. That's when we'll send you to the Royals radio network and pregame coverage for Game 2 between the Royals and the Tigers. Right now, though, we'll get to a break. We've got a long weekend edition of The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly coming up, plus Matt Verderame later this hour, right here on 580 Sports Talk. We had a long weekend here on 580 Sports Talk due to observance of Juneteenth yesterday, which means we've got a long weekend, a Tuesday edition of The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly. And to recap the entire weekend, my good friend Kyle Manthe here along with us from the control room. I've got a very heavy baseball tinge to my Good, the Bad, and the Ugly. Unsurprisingly, we don't have a whole lot else going on in the sports world right now. My good, though, talked about it a lot earlier, the Samad Taylor game on Saturday. Really fun day at the ballpark. Talked about all the KU stuff that was going on. It was KU day there, which obviously I got very invested in. Great weather. Thought it might rain for a while. Ends up holding off until the overnight hours. It was hot, in fact. It was more hot than pleasant, but great weather. Fun game. Fun ending. Get to see a guy celebrate his first career hit, walk off, all that. So cool. I thought Bobby Witt Jr. running to the wall to make sure he picked up the ball so Samad could keep it. Although then Taylor admitted after the game he didn't know where the ball was, that he gave it to someone with the club, and he didn't actually know where it ended up, which is unfortunate. Hopefully they were able to find that for him. But just a really cool moment in a year that has just been a sea of trash for the Kansas City Royals. That was a pretty cool moment. That was awesome. Also, I went and got Joe's after the game, which was absolutely worth it. I haven't had a Z-Man in way too long. Got the jumbo. Oh, so good. So good. We'll always recommend Joe. So, yeah, that was a pretty fun Saturday for you, boy.
My good from the weekend is that my beloved Phoenix Suns traded for Bradley Beal.
Yeah!
For almost nothing. Really enjoyed adding another 25-point scorer to a team, because why stop at 2? Why not just get 3?
So 2 things on this. One, I almost made the Wizards my bad for the weekend. How do you have a player with an albatross contract for your standards who wants out? You're going to try to rebuild, and you don't even get a first-round pick for it. Like, I know first-round picks in the NBA are not often as valuable as first-round picks in the NFL, for example. But still, they got a bunch of second-rounders, 38-year-old Chris Paul, I think he's 38 now, and Landry Shamet. That's it? That's all you got? That horrible trade for Washington. So, by virtue of the opposite, transitive property there, great trade for Phoenix. That's awesome. I'd probably rather have Beal than Paul at this point, too.
For sure. Anytime you can give the 30th best player in the league, like Bradley Beal is, the only no-trade clause in the entire league, that you have to do it. You simply can't not do that if you're the Wizards. So
I didn't realize till the other day he was the only player in the league with a no-trade clause. That's wild. That is also definitely, now that is a more public thing, and now that people have gotten, like people around the league, players, I mean, have gotten to see, dang, he really got to pick his spot. Most of us have the power to do that anyway, but he really got to. I bet you there's going to be a lot of agents negotiating for those in the near future. Yeah, that's awesome for the Suns. They get better TV deal coming up, an owner who's not cheap like Robert Sarver, a good lineup, or at least a good starting lineup. A pretty good taste for your Phoenix Suns.
And it kicks off the transaction wheel for the NBA, which is very fun.
That's true. Yeah, the never-ending, seemingly, off-season of drama for the NBA personnel-wise. With the NBA draft coming up on Thursday, we'll talk about that on Thursday's show. I imagine there's going to be a whole lot of that in the next couple of days, possibly including Portland, also from the Western Conference. My bad from the weekend. So I finally downloaded MLB The Show, the video game. I don't have an Xbox or a PlayStation. I've been waiting for it to go on sale on the Nintendo Switch. Downloaded it there. It was half off this weekend. Awesome. So I finally downloaded it. I was playing all weekend. If I wasn't at the K on Saturday, I was playing The Show. And it's my bad because I'm terrible. I am genuinely freaking awful at that game. I've never been good at baseball video games. Like going back to when I was a kid, we're talking like MVP Baseball 2005 and the early editions of The Show, always was bad. Fun. I enjoy playing them. And I've enjoyed the challenge of the new one. I suck. I am so freaking bad. I'm not even like a bad video game player. Like I'm pretty good at Madden. I'm pretty good at NCAA football. The old college basketball games I was good at. I am so bad at The Show. And it got to a point, I was trying to accomplish something yesterday afternoon that I almost gave myself anxiety, and I just had to put it down and walk outside for a little bit. I literally had to go touch grass. It was too much for me. So yeah, that was my bad. Literally me for the weekend.
I don't know if you can be as bad at The Show as the Royals are at actual baseball.
Fair.
And I'll make the Royals my bad for the weekend because I can't make them the ugly because they did have the Samad Taylor game. But when you start up 4-0 yesterday in a Jordan Lyles start, that's the equivalent of starting up like 10-0 in any other start. You have to come away with a win there, or at least go to like extra innings or something. Don't lose 4-6. So they're my bad. The momentum didn't carry over from the Samad Taylor game.
I was willing to put the Royals as my ugly, and that is what I did. Look, man, although apparently there's some drama going on at the College World Series that could be qualified as ugly right now. I don't have the game on in front of me, but apparently we have an ump show in TCU versus Oral Roberts. Anyway, I went with the Jordan Lyles experience in general. Again, it's not his fault that they lost yesterday. That is not his fault. He gave you a quality start. And you scored 4 runs. He left with the lead. Even when he left and the 2 runs came in that were inherited by the bullpen, he still couldn't have been the losing pitcher. He gave up 1 run through 6 innings. Not his fault at all yesterday. He was good. He was straight up good for most of yesterday. But they're 0-15 in his starts. This was never going to work. Like, this experience, wanting to give him the ball every 5 days and expecting anything tangible on the field that was positive, was not going to happen. You could have given that money to like anyone else pretty much, and their numbers wouldn't look good, but they would be better than this. He probably wouldn't be 0-15 in his starts. He is 0-11 in his own right. But it has somehow surpassed expectations of crappiness up until now, which I find hard to believe for how bad this team has been, that they could surpass any expectations of futility. And that's what Jordan Lyles has done. So again, congrats, Royals fans. Your team made Major League Baseball history yesterday.
My ugly for the weekend is Bob Huggins, everything around him. Ugly might be putting it lightly. Just what he did on Friday was enough to be qualifying for the ugly of the weekend. But when you put it in the scale of everything that's gone on with him this whole summer, definitely not a good look for my guy.
Yeah, it's terrible. And I hope he gets help because he clearly needs it. And we're going to talk more about Bob Huggins coming up in the 4:00 hour today. Thoughts on the end of his career as a basketball coach. It sucks. Like, I have no sympathy for drunk driving. I truly none. But at the same time, you can still feel bad that this is what it has come to for a guy who's made a lot of positive impacts. So we'll talk about him coming up a little bit in the 4:00 hour. We'll also talk to Michael Swain next hour for Jayhawk Weekly. But first, we've got to get to a break. We'll come back. We'll talk all things NFL, and there is a lot going on around the National Football League with Matt Verderame of Sports Illustrated up next on 580 Sports Talk.
dig scars. Glory lasts forever.
How could he not be romantic about football, man?
Matt Verderame covers the National Football League for Sports Illustrated. That's where you can find his work, as well as on SI.com. You can find Matt on Twitter at Matt Verderame. Generally, he joins us on Monday afternoons, but because we were off yesterday in observance of Juneteenth, Matt was kind enough to join us on Tuesday this week instead. So, Matt, we appreciate the time and the flexibility as always. First things first, any fun plans for you guys this past weekend for Father's Day?
My oldest daughter and I drove 13 hours on Saturday to go from the Chicago area to New York, where I grew up. So we're here for the next month. Be joined by the rest of the family next week, and so that's pretty much it. I'm looking forward to a little time away before the season gets into full swing.
How was the drive? I know I've taken the drive from Chicago as far east as like eastern Ohio into Pennsylvania, West Virginia, and south before. Never taken it all the way to New York or to that far east. How is that drive?
Not short. But you know what? I give it to my daughter Maze, who's 5. She was a trooper. She hung in there. We left at 6 a.m. and we got to my parents' house at about 8 o'clock at night. So she was great. It's a long drive, but I will say this. From my driveway to my parents' driveway, it's 800 miles. It was 4 turns. So it's pretty easy.
Yeah, talk about a straight shot. Well, glad you had a good Father's Day weekend. Enjoy the time in New York. Plenty going on around the National Football League I wanted to get to, Matt. And let's start with two of the biggest free agents who are available, DeAndre Hopkins as well as Dalvin Cook. Cook was talking to ESPN's Adam Schefter recently on a podcast and said it would be epic for the league. I believe epic is the word he used. If the two of them linked up, what would be the percentage chance you would give to a team right now signing both Dalvin Cook and DeAndre Hopkins?
2%.
That high?
I I try to be reasonable. I would be floored. I mean, is anything possible? Yes. I've seen people say, "Oh, the Bills could use both of them." Okay, I mean that's sure. There's plenty of teams who could use both of them, but are they going to actually do it? And if you're the Bills, you have Damian Harris, you have James Cook. I mean, how many more guys do you need? And also, like, the Bills actually have to run the football to make that work. Like, it doesn't matter if he's on the team if you run the ball 12 times a game. But the reality of it is, Cook is still a really, really good player. Like, he's coming off of 4 years in a row of at least 1,100 plus yards on the ground. So he is still a guy who's a bell cow. Now, Hopkins, and we've talked a lot about him, of course, over the last month or so. Hopkins is more interesting in the sense he could be somebody who has 1,500 yards, or he could be somebody who kind of continues to trend down. The last couple of years when he's been on the field, he's been great. Problem's been he hasn't been either healthy or he was suspended. The bottom line is to answer the question, no, I do not think they're going to be on the same team. And I think both guys really at this point, there's not a huge rush to sign. I mean, if you're them, why run into it? You know there's going to be offers for both of them. You might as well wait it out, see if some guys get extended, see if some guys come off the tag and free up money on those teams, and then it gives you maybe some more options, maybe drive up the price a bit.
Of the teams that are legitimately interested in Hopkins to move over to him, I know he had a long visit with the Patriots this past week, and the reports coming out were that everything went great and everybody meshed really well, but that's the same with every visit, right? Every visit is great, and everyone had positivity coming out of these free agent visits. It's the same in college sports. Every recruiting trip went so great, right? I actually think the Patriots would make a lot of sense. They're probably going to be at least flirting with the playoffs. I don't know that they'll make it. That's a tough division, but I would imagine they'll be at least flirting with the playoff spots. They've got to figure out if Mac Jones is really a guy. I think that would make an amount of sense. Do you feel like that would be a somewhat natural fit for Hopkins at this point?
Yeah. In fact, when I wrote for SI, it was the day that Hopkins got released. I wrote a piece where I kind of outlined some of the teams I thought would make the most sense. And I think they were third on my list behind Buffalo and Kansas City. So, yeah, I think they'd make a lot of sense. Look, if you're New England, you're not winning the Super Bowl this year with or without DeAndre Hopkins, but that's besides the point. You need to find out what Mac Jones is.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I remember last offseason talking to people around the Eagles, and they of course went out and got A.J. Brown, and they continued to kind of bolster that group. And the thought, believe it or not, in the offseason in that building was, we're not ready to go to the Super Bowl yet, But we need to find out exactly how good Jalen Hurts is. We believe him. Now, of course, as it turns out, they were good enough to go to the Super Bowl, and Hurts was awesome. Now, I don't think that Jones has that kind of a jump in him, and I do not think New England's good enough to get to the Super Bowl. But this is year 3. They really gave him no shot in year 2 with Matt Patricia running that offense. Like, you need to find out, okay, if you've got Juju and DeAndre and Ramondre Stevenson and a decent offensive line, and you've got Gesicki and Henry at tight end, what is this kid? Is he 4,000 yards and 25 touchdowns good, or is he just a guy? And so in that regard, I think it does make a lot of sense for New England to try to bring Hopkins in.
We're chatting with Matt Verderame, staff writer covering the NFL over at Sports Illustrated. You can find his work in the magazine at si.com, and you can also follow him on Twitter at Matt Verderame. He joins us on the Fleming Place Wine and Spirits hotline here on 580 Sports Talk. I wanted to get to a couple of Chiefs notes here real quick, Matt. Number one, and I'm not intending to call Chris Jones a liar. Do you buy that Chris Jones didn't go to the ring ceremony because he was feeling under the weather?
Yes, because I actually had a conversation with someone around that team a day prior to him tweeting that out, and they were telling me how they had 103 fever and they went to the thing anyway.
Really?
So there actually was some illness going around with the team. So I do believe that. I actually do believe it. That normally I 100% would have been in the boat of like, yeah, I don't know. That sounds like it can be an excuse. I can actually, an odd thing to confirm, I guess, but I can confirm that there were some people there that were significantly under the weather. So I actually do buy the excuse just based on what I know about the people being there. Some people were very sick.
Well, that's good to know. Okay, well, see, I was definitely in that boat, so I'm glad to know that. Although, also, I think we should have learned in the last couple of years, don't go to work when you're sick. But, hey, that's beside the point. That's a different topic. In terms of Chris Jones and his future with the Chiefs, I think this is going to get done. I'm like 98% sure he's going to end up with a new contract sometime, either at the start of camp or at least before we get to week 1. Last Thursday, when Patrick Mahomes and Andy Reid spoke, I believe that was also ring night, when they spoke at minicamp during their minicamp press conferences, both kind of put a soft deadline on it. Andy Reid mentioned we'll see him at training camp. Patrick Mahomes said, let's just get him back in the building by training camp. Did that sort of feel like a soft deadline? Not a hard, you must be here and ready to go by then, but just sort of trying to force the issue along a little bit when they said that?
Yeah, a little bit. I mean, look, I think, when you look at these things, I understand why fans sit there and go, well, let's just get it done. Why isn't it done? Why aren't we getting things moving on this? The reality of it is because, frankly, like let's just use this exact situation. So if you're Brett Veach, you're sitting there and saying, all right, well, I'm not going to give undue leverage to Jones's camp by calling them up on April 15th and going, all right, we got to get this done and we got to start moving. Because then all of a sudden, if you're the other side, you're going, all right, well, this guy's desperate. Whereas if you wait until the end of June, beginning of July, both sides have a reason to get it done, because Jones doesn't want to miss a bunch of camp because then he's looking at fines. I mean, it's one thing when you're on the tag. If you haven't signed the tag, you're not eligible to be fined because you're not technically signed by the team. Chris Jones is signed by the team. So you start losing money every day you're not at camp. Under the new CBA, it's actually like a fairly significant penalty. So it creates the soft deadline that you speak of camp, which I agree with. There's a little bit of a reason for both sides. In fact, there's a lot of reason for both sides. You're the Chiefs. You don't want Chris Jones missing a bunch of time. You don't want it to become a big thing that overshadows the start of your camp. And if you're Chris Jones, you don't want to be missing time. You want to get paid. So I've always felt this was going to be a late June to early July type of deal. Somewhere between June 25th and July 10th. I mean, somewhere that range feels right. And if you go back and look, the first time he signed a big money extension, that's when it happened. I do not get the feeling from talking to people around the team over the years. I can't imagine that they're just not going to pay Chris Jones here unless, for whatever the reason, they really just cannot find anything resembling middle ground. It's been a good relationship. Jones has talked about openly that he doesn't want to play anywhere else. The Chiefs have talked openly and privately about the fact they don't want to play him anywhere else. I think that they will find the middle ground. I would be surprised if they don't.
We've got just a few more questions for Matt Verderame, NFL writer for Sports Illustrated. Make sure you're checking out his work at SI.com. Make sure you're following him on Twitter at Matt Verderame, and he joins us here on 580 Sports Talk on the Fleming Place Wine and Spirits hotline. One other Chiefs note to get to, Carlos Dunlap, who had a pretty solid year last year, winning the Super Bowl with the Kansas City Chiefs, and he gave an interview with Forbes, of all places, this week, I guess about his restaurateur aspirations. And he said that while he's working on these personal business things, he's also staying open to football opportunities. And he left the door open to a return to the Chiefs, both saying that he's at least somewhat interested, saying the Chiefs haven't shut the door on that. Does that seem like a move that might make sense? If not now, then maybe sometime during the year? Or does it feel like that group is pretty much locked in for the Chiefs?
Well, when you look at the depth chart, okay, you've got Carl Oftacino as a starter. Frank Clark has now officially moved on. He is now in Denver. You have Anadike Uzama, who's a first-round pick, who you know, if nothing else, is going to be heavy in the rotation. Amena, who comes in on a real deal. I mean, 2 and 20 is not 5 and 100, but he's a good young player. He's going to play a lot of snaps. So if you're the Chiefs, just those three guys, I mean, that's going to be a significant amount of the rotation. You have Mike Dana, who's going to play some. But I do think they could use another body. I don't think it's crazy. Now, they'll flex Jones out there occasionally. We know that. They could bring in a fifth edge rusher and then kind of decide what they want to do up front, because normally they'll keep about 9 defensive linemen. And when you look at the interior, you have Jones. Obviously, Saunders moved on. You have Wharton. Dana will rotate in there. Amena, who occasionally play in there. They brought back Nadi. B.J. Thompson's another guy. Like, he was, I believe, a 5th-round pick. Did he make the roster? Is he a candidate for the practice squad? So there is some play in there. I wouldn't be shocked if they brought Dunlap back. I know last year, for example, Melvin Ingram, the Chiefs had real interest in bringing back Ingram. Ultimately, they just weren't going to meet the price. And not that it was a huge price, but it was a price they weren't going to pay, and he went to Miami. I could see the Chiefs bringing Dunlap back. I don't think the door is shut, but I also don't think the Chiefs are in a spot where they're going to really go above and beyond. It's going to kind of have to fit in their little box, if you will.
Over at SI.com, Matt, you and some of the rest of the Sports Illustrated staff are putting together a 32 teams in 32 days preview series as we get ready for camp and the start of this NFL season. And I believe it was the last team that you published for was the Tennessee Titans. And I wanted to ask about them in particular. I know they also had a visit with DeAndre Hopkins to bring this interview full circle, but that's a team that I think might be kind of bad this year. They've still got Derrick Henry, and assuming he doesn't completely fall off a cliff, you're going to have a baseline of production there. Tannehill, I think, is in the twilight of his career in all likelihood. Their wide receiver room is terrible. The offensive line is a major question. And Mike Vrabel's an awesome coach. I think Mike Vrabel is legitimately one of the best coaches in the NFL. But just talent-wise, that feels like a team that has really fallen off from the last couple of years. What's your outlook for them? Because it feels to me like they've gone from AFC contender to picking in the top 10 of the draft more likely than making the playoffs next year.
Yeah, I agree. And you're right. That was the last one we did. We published that today, I believe. The problem with Tennessee, as you pointed out, the line is young with Skoronski coming in, Andre Dillard coming over, former first-round pick in Philly who never really got traction there. He comes in on a 3-year, $29 million deal. That is a significant risk. That line is a real work in progress. I would argue that receivers are the worst in football. I like Treylon Burks. I actually think he could be pretty good. And Okonkwo is a pretty good young tight end. Yeah, nice rookie season, but they are not going to threaten you. I mean, that is a team that if you said to me right now, which team will have the fewest passing yards in football, I'd probably give you Arizona 1, but Tennessee might be 2.
Wow.
I mean, Tennessee just does not have any talent on the outside. And defensively, they'll be decent because, as you point out, I agree, Vrabel's an excellent coach. Like, they have Simmons up front, they have Autry, Landry's coming back after missing last year with the torn ACL. But they're going to have to win games 17-14. And in the AFC, you're just not winning too many games like that. So it'll be interesting to see if they start 2-5. Do they trade Byard? Do they move off of some of their veteran pieces? And under a new GM, or I guess at this point now, second-year GM, Grant Carthon, do they do that? It'd be interesting to see. But Carthon is rebuilding that team as he starts his tenure in Tennessee.
Matt Verderame covers the National Football League for Sports Illustrated. You can find his work covering the NFL in the magazine at SI.com, and you can find him on Twitter at Matt Verderame. Usually he joins us on Mondays, but was kind enough to move to Tuesday this week since we were off yesterday, joining us on the Fleming Place Wine and Spirits hotline. Matt, as always, we appreciate the time, appreciate you being flexible with us this week, and we will talk to you next week.
Sounds good, guys. Take care.
That is Matt Verderame from Sports Illustrated. Awesome insight into all things NFL. I think Tennessee is going to suck this year. I would put them as one of the 10 worst teams in the NFL. That whole division is terrible, but at least it looks like Jacksonville is going to be a legitimate team this year, like a 9-10 wins at least. I mean, that might win the division by 3 games. Holy cow, that is a bad division, the AFC South. We've got a break for the national and local news. We're done at 5 today, so we've got 1 hour left. We'll talk to Michael Swain. We'll talk Bob Huggins and more on 580 Sports Talk. Hey now, 4 o'clock hour of 580 Sports Talk going up on a Tuesday. Brendan Dzwierzynski here with you, flying solo in studio today and tomorrow. Kyle Manthe is with us. He's in the control room, making sure we stay on the air. Kyle will be dropping back by for What Is Wrong With You coming up in just about 20 minutes or so. Short show today. We're done at 5 o'clock because of Royals baseball. We'll send you over to the Royals radio network right at the top of the 5 o'clock hour. That's when pregame begins for Royals versus Tigers tonight. On the bump for the boys in blue in game 2 of this 3-game set in the Motor City. Daniel Lynch also looking for his first win of the season. He and Jordan Lyles have something in common. Although Daniel Lynch has made far fewer starts than Jordan Lyles. It'll be Michael Lorenzen on the bump for the Tigers. And again, 5 o'clock pregame, 5:40 first pitch for the Royals and Tigers on the Royals Radio Network, which can be heard right here on 580 WIBW. We are still taking your texts and your comments on YouTube throughout the show today. Our text line number, as always, 785-272-9429. And you can hop into the YouTube comment section as well. Our YouTube channel is called Sports on 580 WIBW. Just head to YouTube, search Sports on 580. Will be the top result. Click on us there. You can watch the live stream, hop into the comment section, watch any of our old videos. All that can be found on our YouTube channel. Wanted to get to Bob Huggins to lead off this hour. We will be talking about all things Kansas basketball coming up a little bit later on when we talk to Michael Swain, thefog.net for Jayhawk Weekly. We've got our What Is Wrong With You also this hour. But I wanted to lead things off with Bob Huggins, West Virginia, and the immediate future for Big 12 basketball. Bob Huggins this past week picked up his second known DUI. And I say it like that because there are a lot of rumors out there about some alleged behavior at his various coaching stops. He was arrested for a DUI back in the early 2000s while he was at Cincinnati. And he blew a 0.21 BAC when he was pulled over for a DUI the other day. And this sucks. And it's sad that this is how a legendary Hall of Fame career is going to end. Because in the wake of getting that DUI and in the wake of what has been a rough several weeks now for Bob Huggins, he has resigned from his post at West Virginia University, and he is intending to retire. That's the wording we have gotten. West Virginia, frankly, was pretty nice in letting him resign because, frankly, you could make a credible argument, in my opinion, that West Virginia should have outright fired him right away. Gordon Gee, the president of West Virginia University, said following Huggy Bear's incident on a Cincinnati radio station where he used a very vulgar and kind of out of nowhere homophobic and also anti-Catholic epithet. I still can't believe what he said talking about the fans at Xavier. He said that if there was going to be any more, public incidents with Bob Huggins, that he was done, that they were going to get rid of him. And he was going to get punished semi-severely for the radio incident. He was suspended for 3 games. His pay was docked by $1 million per year on his contract. He had this stipulation that he was going to get canned if anything else happened. It was a final strike, all that. I mean, that's a substantial punishment in terms of college sports coach punishments, and how far those go. But to end like this, to have that incident and now several weeks later have a DUI and not just, he blew a 0.09. This is a 0.21. That's more than twice, going on 3 times the legal limit. He got pulled over at 8 o'clock or was, picked up by the police at about 8 o'clock, 8:30. What are you doing? And I know that this is clear that there's some kind of problem here. And I'm not trying to project my beliefs about alcohol necessarily or any of that on another grown adult. Okay. Bob Huggins is 69 years old. The man can make his own decisions. Man can handle himself. He doesn't need me telling him how to live his life. But you don't blow a .21 in the middle of the evening. This isn't 2 a.m., right? This isn't a what is wrong with you, nothing good happens at 2 a.m. story that we'll talk about, at 4:20 on the show every day. This is a guy who is a very public profile getting destroyed in the middle of the evening. He told police he didn't know where he was. He thought he was in Columbus, Ohio. He was in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. He had beer cans all over his SUV. And his daughter has come out with a statement that she posted on her social media saying, well, he recycles cans. And that there are people around Morgantown who know he's a big can recycler. And that's just what he does. That's why he had garbage bags full of cans in his car. Look, I don't know if that's the truth. I don't know if she's just trying to cover for her dad. I'd get it if she is. It's just a bad look. He had to go. I don't think there's any doubt about that. There's no denying that this is a bad look. And here's the other thing about this. Because while it is sad, and we'll get to more about that here in a moment, don't drink and drive, ever. And I am a person who is going to tell you, and you guys know, I do not drink. I have my own personal reasons why I have never done it, will never do it, do not actively do it. So I feel pretty strongly about these things in general. But I think anybody who is sensible will tell you, don't do it. Especially if you are someone who is as public as Bob Huggins. You can get yourself a driver, man. West Virginia would probably happily have just provided a driver. Pittsburgh is not Morgantown. I get that. It's also not far. If you're going to Morgantown, most people will fly to Pittsburgh and then will just drive south to get to Morgantown. There are plenty of people in Pittsburgh who would have helped out Bob Huggins. He also is more than capable, talking about how he is a grown adult. He can make his own decisions. He can live his own life. He can pull out his own phone and open the Uber app. An idiot like me can do it, all right? I know he can. I know he can pull it out and say, I need an Uber to get back to my hotel. I need to get back to my house. I need to go to where my wife is, whatever it is, okay? I don't know where he was going, what he was supposedly doing when he got tanked like this. He could have called for an Uber. He could have called for a Lyft, okay? Don't do it. He is lucky, truly, genuinely lucky that someone did not die while he was driving around, shredded his tire, completely blitzed, not even knowing where he was. And he's lucky that someone who could have died wasn't him. Okay, so there's a lot of fortune that comes into play here. And that, yes, he lost his job, but he's lucky there wasn't a loss of life here, too. So that's my PSA to you, and I hope that you already know that. Don't drink and drive. There is never an excuse for it. And I feel like, hopefully, societally, we have gotten to a point where it is less acceptable. Some parts of the country, it is still more acceptable than others. And that sucks, and I hope that changes at some point. But I am telling you right now, from me, do not do it. There is absolutely no reason to, okay? But that still brings us to the fact that this is a very sad place for a guy who has meant a lot to a lot of people. And I'm not just talking about as a basketball coach, because Bob Huggins is a Hall of Famer for a reason. He's a great basketball coach, has won a ton of games. And I know there's no national championship and only a couple of Final Fours. Bob Huggins has been a great college basketball coach. I know I saw a lot of K-State folks, our pal Tim Fitzgerald among them, and we'll get Fitz's thoughts about this tomorrow. But I saw Fitz's thoughts that, hey, he did a lot in just 1 year for Kansas State. I saw that from a lot of K-State fans that said, hey, he did a lot for our program in a very short amount of time. And people in Manhattan still have very positive thoughts, generally speaking, about Bob Huggins. And a lot of KU fans like Bob Huggins, too. He and Bill Self, super tight. I think a lot of people like Bob Huggins, even though he has that prickly exterior. He impacted a lot of people in a lot of ways. A lot of kids that he coached, a lot of people who worked for him, and a lot of people in West Virginia. It means something, I think, in that part of the country, and I have not lived there. This is just using what I know, my social studies knowledge. When you're a native son and you go back home and you get to lead somewhere that you care about and where the people care about you, that means something. And in West Virginia, a state that has been, I think, picked on by a lot of the country because it has fallen on hard times and it's not the most affluent state and it relies on a lot of agriculture. It relies on mining. Appalachia has been picked on for a lot of reasons. Having a native son represent your university more than anybody else, that means something. And a guy who's a winner, a guy who has done a lot of charity work, a guy who has made, again, these positive impacts, to see a fall from grace like this and to see a legendary, and I don't use that word lightly, but I will use it here, a legendary career come to a close like this, that sucks. And that is very sad. And I hope that whatever issue Bob Huggins has, I hope that he is able to get some help. I hope he is able to find some help. And I hope he is able to find some peace as well, because I'm sure this is eating him up. And I'm sure that he feels bad about what has happened to his public image, to himself, just in general, and to the public image of West Virginia University and West Virginia sports over the last month or month and a half or whatever it's been with these two very public incidents. And two incidents that, for what it's worth, again, I went into depth about this with the DUI moments ago. Like, I'm not excusing them when I say this is very sad, okay? I still, like I mentioned, cannot believe what he said on WLW radio in Cincinnati. I cannot believe anyone had that thought come into their head. And then you thought, I'm going to say this on the radio. Bob Huggins has been around long enough. He knows what you are or are not supposed to say on the radio or on TV. And I'm not excusing getting absolutely tanked and drinking and driving and getting a DUI when you're 2.5 times the legal limit. And to be completely fair here, Bob Huggins is a large guy. Do you know how much alcohol you have to drink to get to a 0.21 when you are that size? Okay, Bob Huggins is not exactly a lightweight, which is why this is so scary. That's a lot. That's a lot of bad decision-making. And that's why it appears from the outside that there is some kind of issue at play. And I hope he gets help for that. I really do. Because he has done a lot of good for a lot of people. And I hope he's able to find peace. I hope he's able to find some help for whatever problems he may be having. And I hope for West Virginia's sake, they're able to move on. I hope that fences can be mended at some point. Obviously not right now. And they shouldn't be mended right now because it has been a very bad look for that university and its most public-facing figure. But this is unfortunate. It is really sad that this is the way that such a career, a Hall of Fame, legendary career, has come to a close. And I do just hope that every party involved here can find a little peace. And again, I'm glad nobody got more hurt than just losing a job. It's a high-paying job. It's a high-profile job, but it could have been a whole hell of a lot worse had he steered into someone else, had he blown up that tire, which he wasn't able to explain, and hit someone, had something like that happen. So please don't drink and drive. I'm glad nothing worse happened in this situation, but please take it as a note. Call for a ride share, get help so something worse does not happen. And now West Virginia is in a spot in the middle of the summer as we pivot to the actual basketball stuff. What are they going to do? We are not that far away from the start of the basketball season. The transfer portal has been pretty much picked over at this point. And West Virginia has done as good of a job as anybody in the entire country at getting guys out of the portal and improving their roster in that regard. They have, according to 24/7 Sports, the number 2 transfer class in the country, only behind Kansas. By the way, I'm looking at the list right now. 4 of the top 7 programs in the country in terms of transfer classes are in the Big 12, including all of the top 3. KU, West Virginia, TCU, and then Texas comes in 7th. But I don't know exactly what the eligibility is going to look like for the guys who transferred in, if they're going to be given. I think I saw something about they have a short period of time where they can re-enter the portal for a few of the guys, but some have been multi-time transfers and can't leave. It's a whole thing, and I'm not exactly sure how that's going to end up working out. I think it would behoove West Virginia to try to find a coach who can keep that group together. I don't necessarily know who that would be, but I think it would make sense for them to try to keep that group together. But if, let's say, Kerr Kriisa, the transfer point guard from Arizona, or Jesse Edwards, the big man transfer from Syracuse, they say, hey, look, I was coming to Morgantown. I was coming to WVU so that I could play for Bob Huggins. They say, well, Bob Huggins isn't here anymore, and I don't want to be here anymore. They may take that opportunity to go elsewhere. And I want to tread lightly here because I don't want to say, man, this horrible thing happened and it's so sad for West Virginia, right? Anyway, let's pick the carcass clean before the body's even cold. I don't want to do that, but we're also talking about sports. This is a sports story, and this is the prevailing story in college basketball right now is the transfer portal and player movement and all of that. So if some of those players did become available, if they did decide to transfer out or at least explore the transfer portal, I don't know where they might end up, but to give you a local tie, what is a program within 45 minutes of where I sit on Huntoon Hill right now in our 580 studios that could certainly use a starting big man, a skilled 5 to complete their roster? Not that they necessarily have to have it to be a tournament team, but that would absolutely take an elite skilled big man right now. Possibly a team that wears purple and plays in Manhattan, Kansas. So if those players do get free eligibility or do get an extra window to enter the transfer portal because of this situation, I would imagine Kansas State is going to be on Jesse Edwards like white on rice. Seriously. That is like the ultimate fit for this Kansas State team. And would take Kansas State, by the way, from, they're a tournament team. I think with the Kaluma addition, as well as Tyler Perry, that's a team that could finish in the top 4 in the expanded Big 12. That takes you suddenly to a team where you're talking about Jesse Edwards, Tyler Perry, Arthur Kaluma, Naquan Tomlin, Cam Carter. Yeah, that might be a top 3 seed again in the NCAA tournament. That's how good that roster could be. And that's the kind of interest that these players who are going to West Virginia or who have committed out of the portal to West Virginia, that's the kind of attention they're going to get. They did not end up with a top 2 transfer class in the entire country by accident and by getting nobodies. No, these are guys who other teams are going to really want. And maybe Kirk Kriisa does end up leaving. Maybe he says, hey, look, I wanted to play for Bob Huggins. I am going elsewhere for my next year of eligibility. Maybe he ends up going to Xavier, ironically enough, because that's where Sean Miller is, who recruited him to Arizona, and he wants to go back and play for Sean Miller more. Maybe Jesse Edwards says, I'm gonna try something else. I've been in Syracuse, New York. I thought about going to Morgantown, West Virginia. I want to go play out west. I want to go to a bigger city. You know, he's an international player. Both those guys are. Maybe they're going to try to go somewhere else. I don't know what it's going to end up looking like. But what I do know is that West Virginia's got a really good roster going into next year. One of the better rosters overall in the Big 12. But now a huge question mark at head coach. And I think a huge question mark attached to all of those newcomers who are going to say, hey, look, I committed here thinking I was going to play for Bob Huggins. If I can't play for Huggy Bear anymore, I'd rather go elsewhere. Those guys are going to be hotly in demand. And I would imagine around the Big 12, there's probably going to be, I guess a brief moratorium. Huggins is a well-respected guy around the league and around college basketball. Maybe there's a brief moratorium on, hey, let's give him a couple of days before we go trying to pick up the scraps, but then we're going to go scavenge for the scraps. By the way, I approached this already, but the candidates to be the next head coach at West Virginia, fascinating to me who it could end up being. Ben McCollum is the name that's going to come up a bunch. Northwest Missouri State coach. He deserves a Division I job. Everybody knows that at this point. Look at all the trophies. Look at the All-Americans. He's put a player in the NBA. Trevor Hudgens, originally from Manhattan. There is no good reason why he is stuck at the Division II level, and that's not to put down Division II. You guys know I have nothing but love for Division II, for the MIAA, for our local programs, Washburn included. Nothing but love there. But he has won enough, and won with a style that I think is translatable enough that the Division I level should come calling. And I know there's been interest in him, and he has wanted a bigger job at the D1 level because things are nice for him in Maryville. I get it. But the AD right now at West Virginia, Ren Baker, spent several years as the athletic director at Northwest Missouri State, overlapping with the tenure of Ben McCollum. So I would not be surprised for there to be interest. I don't think it will happen because it is hard to sell to your fan base that we hired a Division II coach, even one who has won a bunch of national championships. But still, maybe there is a connection there that will work out. Maybe that will be enough for West Virginia to take the plunge. I doubt it, but that name is going to keep coming up. The name that I have seen come up from the 24/7 sports crew that covers West Virginia, I have seen Andy Kennedy, who had a good run at Ole Miss, was fired under circumstances that not everybody down there agreed with, has found plenty of success at UAB in the last couple of years, and apparently is still very close to Bob Huggins. And he, in fact, according to writing from 24/7 Sports, and Mike Casaza, who covers West Virginia for 24/7, Bob Huggins would have told you to take Andy Kennedy. One name that is going to pop up, he's not going to take the job, but is definitely going to pop up, Joe Mazzulla, head coach of the Boston Celtics. The reason he is not going to take that job is because Joe Mazzulla is the head coach of the Boston Celtics. And apparently, I did not know this, but these West Virginia insiders have clued us into, he wanted to get out of college coaching. Great career at West Virginia, but he wanted to get out of college coaching, didn't like the schedule, likes coaching in the NBA much more. And if you get to coach the Celtics, you'd probably rather stick around coaching the Celtics. So totally get that. Totally understandable why he would want to stay in the NBA. But he did talk to some of the players, tried to pitch to keep things together. He clearly cares about West Virginia, but I don't think he's going to end up taking that job. So I don't know exactly where they are going to go. There are plenty of options. I think that is a very good job. And obviously with a great roster going into next year, I would think they have to figure out something quickly to try to keep that roster together, to try to keep those players together. And as much as I am generally against going to the players and letting them pick the coach, because the coach is going to be around longer in theory, and you've got to have bigger program building aspirations when you're finding a new head coach. I think right now with this group and with this amount of talent that is probably teetering on leaving, I would guess so. I think they've got to have some real input into who the next coach of West Virginia will be. It's just sad. It's not going to be Bob Huggins. We're going to miss him at media day. We're going to miss him on the sideline, his press conferences, his jokes, his quips. It sucks that this is how it ended for Bob Huggins, but I really don't think there was any other course of action that West Virginia could take after that incident this weekend. Let's get to a timeout. We'll play a little What Is Wrong With You next. Then Michael Swain will join us on this shortened edition of 580 Sports Talk. It's time for the first What Is Wrong With You of the week here on 580 Sports Talk. Brendan Dzwierzynski and Kyle Manthe here with you for today's What Is Wrong With You, which, as always, is brought to you by Top City Metal Supply, who cuts the metal you need to your specifications. That saves time, money, and material. never settle when it comes to metal at Top City Metal Supply on South Topeka Boulevard, halfway between Frito-Lay and Forbes Field. We've got 2 new stories going head-to-head today. Kyle, why don't you go first with our What Is Wrong With You this afternoon?
My What Is Wrong With You comes from Peachtree City, Georgia, where Miles Walker, who owns an auto workshop, is now owing almost $40,000 to 9 workers for unpaid overtime and damages.
Not great.
No, not a great start. One of his employees, Andreas Flatten, filed a complaint with the agency in 2021 saying that Walker owed him a final $915 paycheck. And what Walker decided to do was come over to Flayton's driveway and dump all of that amount, $915 in pennies, covered in oil, in his driveway, coupled with a pay stub signed with an expletive along with it. And now he owes 8 other workers a bunch of money as well. And he is being charged by other people as well for not paying the money.
Yeah, so they have found that Walker also violated overtime provisions of the Federal Fair Standards and Labor Act. All right, so this dude's a loser. I'm not telling you what to pay your employees, but when you sign a contract to pay someone, you should pay them. And if there's an understanding that they're going to get overtime for like $915, okay, that's a lot of money, but I imagine it's not so much money that you couldn't afford to pay less than $1,000 in overtime to this guy. It would have been easier for you to simply write a check and just be done with it than to find 91,500 pennies and then dump them in this dude's driveway with an expletive on the pay stub. Give me a break. This dude sucks. Also, not surprised that this guy, who is this difficult to work with or work for, apparently, would actually owe a lot of people a lot of money. $40,000 almost in unpaid overtime to people. If you're going to pay people, then pay them. Come on.
His attorney does state that it doesn't reflect his client's true character as a businessman, and he's just a simple guy just trying to put food on the table for his family.
Oh, yeah. When I think of the ways I try to put food on the table for my wife and I, often think about those times that I tried to screw other people over. Yeah, just normal guy. Very normal guy. That sucks. What a turd. All right, we're going to England. We are going specifically to, and I got to make sure because this is actually in video form, so I've got to read you the captions here. We are going to Stoke-on-Trent in England, not to be confused with Stratford-upon-Avon, where roller coaster riders were having the amusement park they were visiting. They had it shut down. There was adverse weather. So this amusement park shut down the rides. They said, hey, look, we're not going to keep running the rides. There's lightning, there's rain. We got to shut things down. So, for the safety of everybody, we're closing the park. We're shutting down the rides. That included stopping a ride that had passengers in the cars at the very top before the big drop on one of the roller coasters in this theme park. So you're then left with video of these riders climbing down this large metal structure with rain and lightning everywhere. Let them go down first. I promise you, Stoke-on-Trent amusement park, that you are going to be safe letting these people get to the bottom of the ride and letting them off and not forcing them to then walk on the big metallic contraption in the lightning. Kind of defeats the purpose. Just sort of. I'm not sure who cleared this, but whoever was an idiot.
Yeah, you've seen that happen before when like a roller coaster malfunctions at the top and then they stop it and the people have to get out. But that's kind of like, you can't do anything about that. With the rain, it's like, it clearly is the safer option. Just finish the ride. It'll take like a minute or less and then you're done.
Yeah,
you don't have to
probably
walk all the way
less.
down. Yeah.
Like at the very least, even if there's more to the ride, let them go down the drop so that they are low and then can use a lower emergency exit. Because all the roller coasters have emergency exits. This is This is very dumb. Who's your winner for today?
I think that the pettiness of the maybe pettiness isn't the right word, of the auto shop owner dumping all of the oil covered pennies in the driveway, which is over 90,000 pennies. I think that's my winner for the day.
Yeah, I'm with you. This amusement park, bad protocol. However, dude, 91,500 pennies. Just pay your people. Pay your people. Stop trying to screw over your workers. So I'm with you. That is our winner. The 91,000 oily pennies wins What Is Wrong With You, which is brought to you by Top City Metal Supply. Metal cut to order when you need it. Top City Metal Supply on South Topeka Boulevard. Let's get to a break. Jayhawk Weekly is up next with Michael Swain here on 580 Sports Talk.
Play at the University of Kansas.
The goal is to win championships, pure and simple, one day at a time.
That's what made a difference today in the game.
I was hoping that was vodka.
Dollar signs.
Mike. What day is it, Mike?
What a scene in Lawrence, Kansas tonight.
Michael Swain covers the Kansas Jayhawks for Fog.net and 24/7 Sports. You can find him on Twitter at mswain247, and of course his tremendous work covering KU at Fog.net. He joins us now for Jayhawk Weekly on the Fleming Place Wine and Spirits Hotline. What's going on, Michael? How are you, man?
I'm doing well. Enjoying what's been another busy week in the world of Kansas and what should be probably another busy 7 days. So just soaking it all in and taking it day by day.
I was planning on this being our first all-football edition of Jayhawk Weekly for the summer because there's so much going on recruiting-wise, but I'd be remiss if we didn't start with the breaking news earlier today that Zach Clements is back and apparently never actually officially transferred to UC Santa Barbara, and he's going to return to KU, plans to redshirt this year. Michael, how did this all transpire with Zach Clements returning to KU?
Yeah, well, I think you need a pretty good understanding of how these transfer rules work, maybe to get a better picture of how this all went down. So, it's crazy. 90 days ago today is when Zach Clements went in the portal. And from there, he took visits, right? I believe he went to Georgetown, saw UC Santa Barbara, and ended up committing to UCSB. But this summer, he never stepped foot on campus, never enrolled in classes or attended a class. So basically, he never really got the financial aid aspect of things locked in. And that's how a transfer gets officially kind of locked in, for lack of a better term, because there's no national letter of intent. You don't sign anything, right? So that's one of the big things that happens is kind of a financial aid binding agreement is what it end up confirming a transfer. So that didn't happen. And basically, Bill Self said that last week Clements called them and they talked about things. And obviously, KU's a little bit light in the front court, long term, and next season for if KJ Adams is going to play on the wings. So basically, they talked about it, and from there, they came to the decision that hey, Zach can come back to school. He arrived in Lawrence last night. Today's kind of his first full day back. I'm not sure if he was able to practice today with the team. I don't know what time they had that, but now it's a question of, all right, what's next? And it sounds like Clements is going to redshirt. So he will not be playing next season, but he'll be there for practice. And then starting next season, he can use his final 2 years of eligibility. So I think overall it's a pretty good deal for everyone and a pretty crazy story in the modern day transfer portal age.
I guess you already answered the follow-up here, but I was going to ask, do you like this move for KU? I mean, this is, if you're going to fill the extra scholarship you have available, I guess you might as well use it with a guy who knows the expectations, knows the system, at least from a practice perspective. I was not crushed that Clements originally decided to transfer, but I can understand why KU wanted to make this happen.
Yeah, well, look, right, if you approach Zach Clements at the end of last season and say, hey, if you stick around here next season, you're going to redshirt, Zach Clements is going to transfer, right? And I think this is one of those things where just the way the situation plays out, this seems like a best case scenario for everyone involved, right? Zach can stay at Kansas, where I think he really likes it. It's hard not to like it, I think, too. And he can now work on his game to where over the final 2 seasons of eligibility that he has, he can work and maybe fit what Bill Self wants a little bit more, where maybe he's a little bit tougher on the inside, right? I think that's one of the big things that Self talked about, is wanting to see him really improve in his interior presence. And I think he talked about that a little bit when he was a freshman, and I think that's something that maybe he lacked last season. So I just look at this and say, I think it's a great move, right? Clements can work on his game to where maybe he fits what Bill Self wants a little bit more next season. And if Hunter Dickinson is still around, then okay. Zach Clements can be your featured big man off the bench. And if Hunter Dickinson is gone, then there's probably an avenue for Clements to compete for a starting job, if not a high-minute position. So I think it's a really win-win for everyone involved here.
Michael Swain of Fog.net and 24/7 Sports is joining us here on 580 Sports Talk on the Fleming Place Wine and Spirits Hotline. It's Jayhawk Weekly. You can find Michael on Twitter at mswain247 and all of his great work covering KU over at Fog.net. Make sure you're a VIP over there. If not, very affordable. They run deals all the time if you're not a VIP yet. And you get inside scoops like, hey, Zach Clements is on campus before the rest of the world knows. So definitely worth it over there at 24/7 Sports. All right, Michael, let's get to the football. A lot of recruiting stuff to get to this week. First things first, talk to me about offensive line recruiting. We have heard about wide receivers, defensive backs. We've had some edge presence a little bit here and there with some of these recruits. Offensive line recruiting, KU's got to have that next group coming up. The line should be pretty good, I would think, in 2023. What sort of progress has KU made in that regard, especially this past weekend on the official visit trip?
Yeah, so they've gotten 2 commits. The most recent one that you're alluding to is Kenny Anene from Minnesota. And he's a really fascinating case where offensive line recruiting is very interesting, because if you look at the translation of recruiting to the NFL draft, basically you have to be a blue chip prospect, right? 4-star, 5-star, or you have to be an under the radar guy that doesn't necessarily kind of fit the bill of maybe someone that's got several Power 5 offers and is kind of in that high 3-star range, right? You want to be basically a blue chip guy or a really kind of Tracy frame guy. And that's what Kenny Anene is. He's about 6'5", about 270 pounds, but he's got really, really long arms, 34-inch arms, and he would have been tied for the 12th longest arm length at the NFL Combine among offensive linemen if he was there last year. So he's got the potential and the traits. He's got a basketball background. He can dunk. He's athletic. And he's the type of guy that can really grow into being a tackle. But if he ends up being someone like Kobe Baines who can play either tackle or guard, I think you feel pretty good about him playing there. And then you've got someone like Harrison Utley, who committed 2 weeks ago, maybe. The weeks are blending together here, but he's another guy that is kind of fits a different mold where he's got more of a ready-made body. I talked to him at KU's camp last Wednesday, and he's someone that is really, really strong and really fits the bill of a smart, high IQ player. You look at both of these offensive linemen, both of them have, I Ivy offers, Service Academy offers. Guys are really smart. And Scott Fuchs needs smart offensive linemen because although the scheme and stuff can be simple for the players, the technique itself can be really hard to learn, and you have to be pretty smart to do it. So I think these are two guys that really fit what KU's looking for.
How many spots are left along that offensive line, or really across the board for this KU team? Because there have been some big names that have committed already. We know there's always going to be spots open roster-wise for transfer commitments. What still is KU looking to fill for the class of 24?
Yeah, so I think offensive lineman, another tackle is probably a big position. Another safety is something the KU staff wants. And for me right now, like I look at this class and I say, what does this class need? It needs defensive linemen. And I think they're going to take 2 defensive ends this cycle. DJ Warner from Desert Edge is going to be on campus. He's kind of a part of that contingent that KU is going to bring out this weekend. And then they've also got some other guys they're in on, right? I think we talked about Dak Brinkley, past 4-star edge from Texas. And so those are really the positions KU needs right now. It's another tackle. And I think really defensive line after that. So you're looking at this class probably going into the fall. Ideally would be at probably 17. And I think maybe if someone like Nick Marsh wants to join, right, a top 150 recruit nationally, the type of guy that Kansas would have never landed before, right? That's even counting with someone like Jamar Chase. And if he wants in, KU will take him. So I think overall, you're probably looking at this being about a 17-man class going into the fall if everything breaks correctly.
A few more questions for Michael Swain, who covers the Kansas Jayhawks for Fog.net, part of the 24/7 Sports Network. He's on Twitter at mswain247, and he joins us every Tuesday here on the show for Jayhawk Weekly on the Fleming Place Wine and Spirits Hotline. We've talked a couple times in the last 2 weeks, Michael, about why this is different and why the momentum feels different and the caliber of player that KU is bringing in feels different. I think there is an understandable worry, and I would be lying if I didn't feel a little bit of this as well, that all of these guys eventually make it to campus. And there have been barbs from rival fan bases, which is to be expected. That's, college football rivalries that, well, it's just a flash in the pan. Remember all those Louisiana guys? Yeah, not a big deal for Kansas. I know when Austin Alexander committed a few weeks ago, there were Illinois fans. I know plenty of them who said, okay, yeah, he's never making it to campus there. Iowa fans who said the same about Jalen Todd. Why is there confidence that this isn't just recruiting splashes? This is actual legitimate recruiting commitments with this 24 class that for right now is shaping up to be, I think, the best in KU recruiting website era history.
Yeah, so I think there's probably a lot of factors that are going to go into this, right? I think first things first is relationships, where I think you look at a lot of these guys, right? Like KU's been on Jalen Todd since last December, and Chris Simpson and Jordan Peterson developed a really, really good relationship with him. You look at Austin Alexander, same sort of deal. KU was in on him a little bit earlier, right, in the spring, but Jordan Peterson developed a really good relationship with him. Same thing with Damani Maxson. This is a guy that KU was on hard from the get-go, and Brian Borland and Jonathan Wallace developed a really, really good relationship with him. And so I think those relationships and that side of things really helps. But let's be real here. Kansas has to win games this fall. They can't go, 3-9 or 4-8. They need to win games to keep a class like this together, because as losses start to pile up, right, the negative recruiting will continue, and things like that are, you can only withstand it for so long, right? And I think winning games in the fall is something that's really important for that. So for this team, right, it's going to be about, okay, can they show improvement? Can they really play competitive football in a bunch of games, right? We saw last year where they were close in some games and then got blown out. Can they be a lot more competitive, where then you can go to these guys and say, okay, look, we were competitive in a loss at Texas. Well, look, if you come here and you develop over the course of 3 years, you're the type of guy that can come here and make sure that one-score loss is a one-score win. So things like that you can kind of spin, but they have to be competitive. And so that's really what I look for long-term in keeping this class together, because as good as the relationships are, these high school kids that are very coveted want to play for winning programs, and I think Kansas needs to continue to show that this fall.
Last thing I've got for you, Michael, and then we'll let you go. Appreciate the time as always. NBA draft coming up on Thursday. Grady Dick expected to go in the lottery. Jalen Wilson probably going at I would assume, around the first 10 picks of the second round. I know you got to talk to Bill Self today. What is the current outlook for the two Jayhawks in the draft coming up this week?
Yeah, it seems like really there's a lot of talk around the lottery right now for Grady, obviously, but I think it's more of a question, how is this lottery going to shake out? I don't think anyone knows because of the potential of trades happening. And so I think there are some teams that could really like what Grady brings in terms of his size and shooting. I know obviously I think a lot of people are linking him to the Orlando Magic at number 11, but I think he could really go anywhere kind of really outside of the top 5, between 5 and 14. And then you kind of go to Jalen Wilson, and I think early second round is probably where you'll see him land. And you really just got to hope for at that point, right? A good situation where he can go in and be a guy that learns and then maybe develops into a role player. So I think that's kind of the outlook for both of those guys heading into Thursday's draft.
I saw one mock draft that had Jalen going late 30s to Sacramento. And I know that the Kings were a playoff team this year. I know that they are a lot better. But, man, I have seen too many Thomas Robinsons and Ben McLemores and other Frank Masons go to Sacramento and see their careers fall apart. So, personally, I'm not hoping for that one. But best situation for both, obviously, is on the wish list. Michael Swain covers KU better than anybody. He does it over at fog.net. Make sure you're following him on Twitter at mswain247. And he joins us every Tuesday, bottom of the 4 o'clock hour for Jayhawk Weekly. Michael, we appreciate the time as always, man. Thank you so much. And we will talk to you next week.
Awesome. Sounds great, guys. Talk to you then.
That is Michael Swain from fog.net. Awesome insight into all things KU. And, of course, we'll talk more NBA draft coming up on Thursday. We'll see where the KU guys end up, Grady Dick and Jalen Wilson. And tomorrow on the show, we'll talk to Tim Fitzgerald of GoPowerCat.com about where the K-State guys might end up. Keontae Johnson and will Marquise Noel get drafted. Awesome stuff as always, though, from Michael. Make sure you're checking out fog.net. VIP is absolutely worth it at 24/7, by the way. You would have found out before Bill Self's press conference today that Zach Clements was on campus, because I saw that and thought, what the hell is going on? So definitely worth it for the VIP over at 24/7 Sports. We've got a short show today. We are done at 5 o'clock, so we'll take one final time out, come back, wrap things up with the final word here on 580 WIBW.
In conclusion, you better wrap it up.
Time to wrap up 580 Sports Talk. An hour early today. We're off at 5. We'll send you to the Royals Radio Network at the top of the hour for Royals baseball as they take on the Detroit Tigers. 5:40 first pitch, 5 o'clock pregame on the Royals Radio Network right here on 580 WIBW. We will be back right around normal time tomorrow. The Royals have a 12:10 getaway day first pitch against the Tigers tomorrow. So, unless we get an inordinately long game, we'll be back right around 3 o'clock. 3 o'clock. Whoa there. Right around 3 o'clock, we will recap tonight's Royals game, tomorrow afternoon's game as well. We've got plenty more to get to. Tim Fitzgerald will join us. We'll talk some college football predictions from Shahan Jayaraja of CBS Sports. All that coming up on tomorrow's show. My final word for today, though, again, it's just that it was sad that this is the way things ended for Bob Huggins at West Virginia. I think once some time passes, we will look back much more fondly on the overall career of Bob Huggins, what he was able to do for K-State basketball in Manhattan, the success he had at Cincinnati and especially at West Virginia, what he did for the people of West Virginia for that school should not be forgotten. A great personality for the game, but by the same token, this was deserved. He was told you can't mess up again or you're gone. Well, he messed up again in a worse way, I think, than the radio interview, which in and of itself was astounding and certainly wrong. And West Virginia, I think, let him off nicely by letting him resign and retire than just firing him publicly, which for such an egregious DUI probably was in the cards. It's sad. I hope he gets the help he needs. Very fascinated what is going to happen with West Virginia going forward. Who's going to stay around? Who's going to transfer? Who can transfer? Certainly fascinating to watch. That does it for 580 Sports Talk for today. We're back tomorrow right around 3 o'clock after Royals baseball. But until then, for Kyle Manthe, I'm Brendan Dzwierzynski. We'll talk to you tomorrow right back here on 580 Sports Talk.